fine with. Like,
Yeah, I think it's cool.
it's okay. We'll agree to disagree on that one, which is, I think, a lot of how we feel about the Paradox Pokemon in comparison to each other.
It does
at this
seem
point.
that way. Yeah, we're kind of learning that as the day goes on.
It's honestly so sad because Iron Treads is, I think it's so adorable, and it's not something you're a fan of.
No, I think it's kind of ugly.
Alright,
Anyway, we got a
that's
cool
fine.
matchup here. We have Trick Room Sun and a Rain team, which is always fun to watch. Sun versus Rain. It's like a classic
Tale as old as time.
Kyogre versus Groudon type situation. But Abhu's running the Trick Room Sun team that has Fergraph, Hariyama, and Torkoal, which of course is like a pretty common Trick Room core. And then he's also got Meowscarada and Gambit and Iron Bundle, which is kind of like a fast mode that gives you an opportunity to do some stuff outside of Trick Room. And then on Brian's team is the Rain mode that has Salamence, Mimikyu, Iron Bundle, Pelipper, Kingambit, and Breloom. So some pretty like common partners for the Rain there. And I think Rain Iron Bundle is something I had been kind of thinking about, and I'm kind of excited to see it function.
I just am in love with the fact that Breloom is on there, just because, like, you know, if I'm looking at Pelipper and Breloom, those are not two Pokemon I would ever think to myself, like, ah, yes, my favorite Pokemon to use competitive-wise, and, like, seeing them kind of jump up a little bit and being used is, like, really fantastic. I know, personally, some people are very excited about Breloom, so I'm, like, really happy to see it being, really, at least in these early, like, Season 2 metas, but, honestly, like, the fact that Iron Bundle is on both of these teams is also just really interesting because, like you said, you know, if you're Abhyu, you've got that whole, like, you've got two modes to go for. Like, you've got Trick Room, you've got something fast, right? So really, you kind of, like, have sort of a choice. And it's nice to see that no matter what format I'm in, Torkoal is always just going to be there.
Yeah, and it's even more prevalent in this format, too, with all of the Photosynthesis Pokemon, so it kind of gets to fill more of a supportive role where you don't have to run Booster Energy in order to activate that ability. And Abhyu doesn't have any of those options on his team, but it is something that Torkoal is going to see a lot more usage for as a result. But this is just kind of like a basic, kind of like straightforward Torkoal Trick Room team. You can kind of see the items there where it's running choice specs, and we could also see that Abhyu is actually just going to go for Fake Out Trick Room, which is like a pretty classic lead for these kinds of teams as well. And then when you're playing these Rain teams, the kind of like conventional way to play it is that you sort of almost always want to have Pelipper in the back so that you can kind of switch it in if Torkoal ever gets to a position where it gets to attack. And Brian also has a Trick Room on his own team and a Kingambit, and those are both kind of things that do pretty well in the Rain against this kind of team.
So we're going to see Salamence and Breloom. I love this Gen 3 like lead here. Fergraph and Kingambit is going to be the choice on the opposite end. Though Intimidate here going to go down into that Fergraph and the Kingambit, but Kingambit's going to say, hey, love that, give me that Intimidate. Going to get that extra attack instead for those troubles.
Yeah, but this is actually a pretty good position for Breloom because it can actually just go straight for a Spore. There's no fake out. So it's free to just kind of like go for a Spore and prevent Trick Room coming out of the Fergraph slot. But Kingambit is also like has to be careful that if Breloom does go for like the Spore, it does also have the opportunity to Mach Punch, which is one of the things that it likes to do as well. So Breloom, much to Regina's pleasure, is in a pretty good spot to like cause a lot of havoc here on turn 1.
I mean, just look at him. He's so excited. Like, he's so excited to be here. And we're actually going to see a Terrasalizing right here on that first turn. So Kingambit actually going to be the Pokemon here with Terrasalize. It's going to be a Dark Kingambit. So,
I think it must survive Mach Punch.
Yeah, Kowtow Cleave and Sucker Punch are going to be the two moves here that are going to get that extra boost here. As Fergraph goes for the Protect on this turn. So all eyes on that Breloom right now. Actually, no Mach Punch here. As Heat Wave is actually going to be the move of choice here from that Salamence. Salamance's going to be able to hit that Kingambit. Does some okay damage here, but thanks to the fact that there is no that is no more steel typing here. Not going to take super effective damage. A Spore from Breloom is actually going to go into that protected Fergraph spot. Kowtow Cleave is going to get that extra boost as well from both the Defiant boost and that Terra typing as Salamence goes down on this turn.
Yeah, really smart play by Abhyu. Basically just reading directly into what Brian was trying to do. And he just takes a knockout, takes the Heat Wave, was lucky to dodge the burn there, but really it's just like a very safe Terra plus attack into that slot. And now Mimikyu comes in, and this is still, again, like Breloom is in a position to be causing a lot of trouble, whether or not it wants to Mach Punch, or it can just go for a Spore into Fergraph again. It definitely has like the opportunity to be causing a lot of problems, but it does kind of, you have to call it right? Like you can be Sporing into Protect, and then you can be Mach Punching into Protect, and Gibbon has a Protect as well. And then Mimikyu is also like one of those situations that makes you think twice about trying to click Trick Room, because it can also do that, and sometimes they're slow enough to like be causing problems in Trick Room. But here we go.
All right, King Gambit going for the Sucker Punch is actually going to fail here as Mimikyu's Play Rough is going to correct down to that Frigoraph, going to get some more HP damage down onto that, as Breloom is able to use Spore here onto that Frigoraph, is going to put it to sleep this turn. So Sucker Punch failing here, Frigoraph is going to fall asleep, is going to take that necessary sleep turn, going to be unable to go for like that Trick Room setup, and now it's just sort of a sitting duck, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think now you just get to go for Spore plus another Play Rough into Frigoraph. You can just Spore the King Gambit slot and not even have to mess around with Sucker Punch at all. So this is, again, like a pretty good position for Breloom, but he actually is going to catch something with the Sucker Punch here.
Yeah, so Sucker Punch boosted here is going to hit that Breloom, not able to pick up the knockout here, as Mimikyu goes for a Play Rough, is able to pick up the knockout here on that King Gambit. That super effective damage really helping it out here, as King Gambit does go down, is at least able to get one Sucker Punch in with that boost, was able to get the Kowtow Cleave into that Salamence. Mimikyu losing that HP because of that Life Orb, as Bullet Seed is actually the move here from that Breloom, is going to hit this down to the Frigoraph. If it can hit one more time, that would be great. Yep, yes. There we go. Is going to pick up that knockout here. That pause in between those animations is always just like, is it going to keep going here? But now a double knockout here, leaving Mr. Hariyama and the Torkoal in the back to try to at least reverse this.
Yeah, obviously a good turn for Brian there as he gets 2 knockouts, although I think that was probably like the slightly riskier way to play that, where he had to give away Breloom's Focus Sash in order to take the 2 knockouts, where you could have just, like Sport King Gambit and dealt with it at a later date. But I think you are never really too concerned about taking 2 knockouts on any given turn, and Torkoal Hariyama without the Trick Room up is far less scary than with the Trick Room up, of course, and Mimikyu's actually just going to get the opportunity to go for a free attack here anyway.
Alright, and so Breloom actually going to say, hey, you know what, don't have my sash, don't want to be here, is going to get switched out here for the Pelipper, so going to get a rewriting of the weather here. It was sunny, and now there's rain, much like how I feel right now in Southern California half the time. I will always cry about the rain. That's fake out here from Hariyama, goes into that Pelipper. Pelipper's totally fine with that, as Hariyama survives the Play Rough from that Mimikyu, also, and actually gets the attack drop as well, as Mimikyu takes a little bit more damage from that Life Orb. Torkoal's Flamethrower there going into that Mimikyu is absolutely just like, even though this guys probably wouldn't have done as much because of that rain, but at least bringing the disguise now on that Mimikyu, as the Flame Orb from Hariyama at the end of this turn is going to burn it, but already in a precarious position.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure like all that really has to happen is for Pelipper to hit 1 attack into Torkoal. Torkoal is actually choice spec, so there's not really anything it can do right now anyway, except like kind of a pittance of damage to Mimikyu. Pelipper's not really going to take all that much. Hariyama's likely not even going to get to move, so just like any kind of combination of attacks from Brian here can clean up the game.
Alright, a wide guard actually from Hariyama here, going to protect both of them from any sort of spread moves happening, as Mimikyu goes for the Shadow Sneak. Yeah, so going to pick up that easy knockout here on Hariyama. Yeah, I'm like looking at this, and there's no spread moves here at all for Brian's side. Mimikyu mostly just damage from itself on the Life Orb Refill. His Hurricane going to land into that Torkoal, does a considerable amount of damage. Torkoal going for a Flamethrower down to that Mimikyu spot, but Mimikyu takes it like a champ because it is fizzling out from the rain. And seeing what's happening. Actually, maybe just trying to see like what extra damage you can like get into here, but honestly I think what like Shadow Sneak and Hurricane just picks up.
Yeah, I mean any combination of attacks, right? But yeah, these kinds of games are the ones that when Trick Room doesn't go up, it looks a little scary, right? There's not really a game plan, and I think this team in particular, like as long as Pelipper's waiting in the back, I don't know what the game plan is. Even if Trick Room does go up, I think there's a pretty good game plan, and I would say a positive matchup on Brian's side, and he definitely was able to exploit it pretty well in game 1 there, where he was never really, I mean, Abhyu won turn 1, but aside from that, like it was a pretty comfortable sort of like Pelipper's been in the back the whole time. If you bring in Torkoal, as long as I have like 1 Pokemon left, then
we're okay. Yeah, especially because like with the Frigoraph not being able to get the Trick Room up, or you're always in a rough spot, especially after you get Spored, right? So trying to call the Spores, I think at that point you're kind of looking at the Breloom as like the more kind of threatening thing here, because it's really interesting that usually whenever you get an Intimidate down into something like a King Gambit, all of a sudden it's scarier. But you're feeling at Brian, the way he played it, it's sort of like, yeah, King Gambit's there, that's cool, but not super worried about it, even with that +1 and even with that boost from the Terra typing.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of, I think a lot of times when you're playing with King Gambit, I think you want to be clicking Iron Head and Kowtow Cleave like as much as possible, right? Is that Sucker Punch should be kind of like a last resort kind of move where you're using it to like pin a low health slot, or you're like, you know, trying to, you know, just do a little bit of chip damage. But King Gambit is bulky enough and at its best when you're clicking those kinds of moves, especially when you Terra Dark, and we saw how much damage it did to Salmons there on turn 1. So when you're sort of like forcing yourself into having to go for those sucker punches, it means you're probably not in the greatest position. And I think he sucker punched like 2 or 3 turns in a row, which is definitely not like the kind of position that you want to be in with King Gambit, especially when you have a Trick Room on your team. But we saw Abhyu is already going to go ahead and
lock into Trick Room mode again.
I think he switched though to leading with Hariyama, so he's going to make sure that he gets the Trick Room up with a fake out. Instead of, you know, it was nice to catch the Intimidate with Defiant, but ultimately didn't really accomplish all that much.
Alright, and Mimikyu and Breloom now going to be the lead of choice there as Frigoraph and Hariyama. So like you said, that fake out pressure now just a lot better here. And honestly, you know, Breloom and Mimikyu I think also just like pretty like decent adjustment, because like you said, Mimikyu also has the opportunity to go for a reverse Trick Room.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard call to make to try and reverse Trick Room, especially on turn 1. But there's also not really anything on the field that's preventing Mimikyu from just like going for the Trick Room on turn 2. This is actually one of my favorite uses of Terra. This is so funny.
I love this so much. Ghost Terra typing for that Breloom. Fake out from Hariyama. Not going to be able to touch that now Ghost as play rough from Mimikyu. Unable to pick up the knockout here on Hariyama. However, it's still going to take some damage from that Life Orb, and Spore, because there was no fake out, going to put that Frigoraph to sleep, denying the Trick Room.
Yeah, I mean, it's about as good a turn as you could hope for. I mean, now you can do any combination of things here, where if you want to like Mach Punch Hariyama, you want to play Rough Shadow Sneak Hariyama, you want to try and Spore the slot and catch a sleep. But yeah, you know, we're talking about whether or not it was going to be smart to just like go for a second Trick Room and try and reverse Trick Room on turn 1, but when you have that opportunity available to you, you don't even need to.
Yeah, you just know like, this is my denying Trick Room. I just changed my typing.
Yep, I'm going to be a Ghost now.
Yeah, and honestly, like, the Hariyama also is like really just in a real spot, because a lot of moves can't even land right now onto those Pokemon, but is going to get knocked out here from that play rough from the Mimikyu. Honestly, 9 times out of 10, I think this Mimikyu's only really been taking like Life Orb damage. This Breloom goes for a Bullet Seed, does a lot of damage on that first one.
That's probably an Oko if it 5 hits, right?
Yeah,
it definitely is.
After that critical hit, it is definitely within range for like those knockouts if it gets, I think, all 5 of them. Oh no, so just the 3. Frigoraph might have a chance to. Yep, there's the wake up. So actually fantastic here as that Frigoraph is able to wake up and sets up that Trick Room.
Yeah, I think you feel good about having the Trick Room up, but it's still going to be really tough to get into a position where you can stop Mimikyu from just reversing it. Like, I'm pretty sure Mimikyu can just reverse it here because Torkoal's going to be going first, and I don't think that Frigoraph can knock out Mimikyu with a maybe it can with a Shadow Ball. I don't know.
It's gonna be rough.
Maybe it can, but like Eruption plus like a Shadow Ball into Mimikyu is probably what you have to go for here to stop Trick Room from going back up. And then Pelipper is like still in the back.
Pelipper's just waiting for its turn.
Pelipper is still in the back and can kind of come in and stop Torkoal from doing much of anything, like anytime that it wants to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard, like when the Weather Wars is happening and like you are probably having to think consistently like, oh, their Weather Starter is now in the back as well, so I have to be careful about what's going here. Yeah, Mimikyu actually just gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna piece on out here. We are gonna be able to see that Pelipper come in here, rewrite that weather, and we're, instead of again one more time instead of that sun, we're gonna have the rain. And that Eruption, you know, still gonna do some good damage because of the Pelipper being the Torkoal being at full health, but rain is gonna sort of just quite literally rain on its parade. Is going to be Terra type this turn for that Fire Terra type. Which would have been great in the proper weather or even in no weather.
It's still going to do a pretty good amount of damage.
Yep, there's that Eruption at full health. I love
Terra Fire Choice Specs is still kind of a lot of damage.
Kind of fun to hear there. Breloom still holding on. As Frigoraph is going to double down into that Pelipper. That Pelipper going to take the Shadow Ball and the Eruption.
Very well.
Like, so nicely. Breloom's going to put things to sleep though. Honestly, and that wasn't even like with an activation for the Sash.
Yeah.
Either.
The Sash was still there, but it didn't need it that time. And now you just kind of like want to make sure that you keep Pelipper alive because, you know, kind of the best way to win these sorts of weather wars is to make sure that your weather setter is kind of like the last one standing. And if you can prevent them from having to switch like you could switch Torkoal right and bring the Sun back in, but as long as Brian has more Pokemon than Abhyu, it doesn't really matter, right? Because you can always get Pelipper in one more time. And it's sleeping anyway, so you know, this is a pretty good position. There's a lot of different ways that Brian could play this end game. Eventually, you want to get Mimikyu back onto the field. Whether or not you're doing that by like sacking the disguise, or if you want to just kind of like sack a different Pokemon and hard switch it in, like Mimikyu getting back onto the field is basically just going to be like a really good position.
Yeah, Breloom going to switch out for that Kingambit though, as Hyper Voice isn't even enough to pick up the Pelipper knockout here still. Is going to catch the Kingambit just a little bit on that switch in, is going to activate that Throat Spray to boost the special attack here, the Fergrass. Pelipper going for the Hurricane, going down into that Torkoal. It's going to do a lot of damage with that critical hit. So even if it were to wake up, that Eruption is going to do absolutely nothing. Still going to be enough to like knock out that Pelipper, sure. But now you're sort of in a spot where like Kingambit, you know, kind of is in the rain, and it's a great spot for it.
Yeah, there's really nothing that's going to cause Kingambit to take any sort of like meaningful damage here. It could take a Shadow Ball, great. It could take like a 4 health Eruption in the rain, cool. So Brian just kind of has to make sure here, I think, that Pelipper stays alive, because this kind of play is sort of like the one thing that could potentially, like if there's some world where Trick Room goes back up and Torkoal gets onto the field after Pelipper's been knocked out, that's a little spooky. So like I myself, I don't think I would have even made that play, and I probably would have just switched Pelipper out to make sure that you keep the rain in the back. But this is fine too, as long as there's a way that you're like pinning Fergrass from attacking. You can't Sucker Punch it.
Oh yeah, because Armor Tail.
Cannot Sucker Punch it.
That's such an interesting like sort of like ability, right? Because like it just sort of sets off your opponent's like Kingambit, and so I mean, I've always like Kingambit was able to at least come in really like nicely and safely, right? You didn't have to worry about any sort of attacks for Pelipper going for that wide guard. But I mean, now what do you? Because you're really like on a timer with those Trick Room turns.
I think this is the last one. I believe, if I'm counting correctly, that this is the last turn of Trick Room. I like when the players check so that we can see, because we're always forgetting.
We appreciate that.
But yeah, Pelipper is going to be preserved here, and Mimikyu is basically going to get switched in. It's going to, if it's a Hyper Voice, it might just get in for free here. No, it's going to trade its disguise, but I think this is a smart switch. And then as long as you're knocking out Fergrass here so that Pelipper can be on the field after Torkoal, like this is... Kingambit's just in a phenomenal position. I think putting Kingambit into the rain is like one of my favorite things to do in this gen. It's like very strong.
And you know what, Mimikyu was actually like in a great spot too, because like, you know, disguise is broken, sure, but Trick Room is done now. Torkoal comes back in. Sure, you bring in the rain, but Pelipper got out of there. This Torkoal's gonna be asleep still. It's gonna go last now. Like there's just a lot working against it.
Yeah, and another thing that sort of factors in here is that Brian's Kingambit is actually the only one that knows low kick, so it has like an uncontested upper hand in this matchup as well. So this is going to be sealed up in just a minute here. You know, Brian has all 4 Pokemon. The Torkoal has not. No, it took 1 turn of sleep, I think.
It did. It took its necessary turn of sleep.
So it could wake up here and go for I don't know what it's going to do. But just getting Pelipper back onto the field here, and again, if it gets knocked out, it doesn't even matter because the rain's going to stick around for 5 more turns. Torkoal can't switch out, so you can just kind of go ahead and protect Kingambit here, and it's going to go ahead and just hopefully attack into Torkoal. That's attacking into Torkoal is probably correct here.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine that like Torkoal somehow survived like that 5 turns? But yeah, like Torkoal's gonna get knocked out, and just that's sort of just the end of the game. There's no way this lone Kingambit can actually take care of all 4 Pokemon on its own. And like you said, Brian's own Kingambit does have like low kick, so honestly, at that point, there's not really much you can do.
Yep, you are correct, and it is gonna get to take 1 knockout there, sort of like a, I don't know, feel good.
Last hurrah.
Sort of feel good, like yeah. That Pelipper that gave me so much trouble, it's gone. Yeah, but the low kick is going to seal it up. And again, this is a tough matchup. And Pelipper's a really good Pokemon, right? Is that even when Trick Room went up, the combination of like a Terra type on Breloom with the rain being switched in made it so that Torkoal could really never get anything going. And it allowed Breloom to literally just sit in front of it, take an attack, and put it to sleep. And being able to do that where the sleep is moving last so that it necessarily sleeps the next turn is like such a huge momentum shift. But these kind of teams, like the Sun Trick Room teams, are just like so like they're strong, but they rely on like such a specific set of conditions that it's like really hard that if you don't like really seize momentum immediately, it's really hard to sort of